Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We're always here to help you discover amazing opportunities, and today we're focusing on something really special for our listeners who are dreaming of a new life in Canada.
Specifically Nova Scotia.
Exactly. It's a beautiful province,
Yeah.
and they're actually looking for talented people just like you.
They are, and that's where the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream comes in. This program is designed to connect skilled individuals with the specific needs of Nova Scotia's job market.
So it's not just about being generally skilled, it's about having the right skills.
At the right time for Nova Scotia, it's like a tailored invitation saying, hey, we need your talent here.
That sounds promising. But I know a lot of people might be hearing about this for the first time, so let's break it down a bit. I understand it starts with Canada's Express Entry System. Can you give us a quick overview of what that is?
Absolutely. Think of Express Entry as Canada's talent pool. It's where you create a profile showcasing your skills, education, work experience, language abilities. It's a points-based system, so you basically rack up points based on your qualifications.
Ah, I see. So it's like putting yourself out there on a national level, and then Nova Scotia can see who might be a good fit for them.
Exactly, and that's where the letter of interest comes in. If Nova Scotia sees that you have skills that match their current needs, they'll send you this letter of interest. It's basically saying, hey, we're interested, come apply to our province.
Okay, so that's the first step, getting that letter of interest. But even then, you still need to meet all the eligibility requirements for the program.
Right. You can't just assume you're in just because you got the letter. You still have to prove you meet all the criteria.
And I know we don't want to bore everyone with a long list of requirements, but there are a few interesting details in our sources that I think are worth highlighting. One that caught my eye is the financial aspect.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. You need to show that you can actually support yourself financially once you arrive in Nova Scotia. They don't want people struggling to make ends meet.
That makes sense. They want to make sure you can get settled and find your feet without, facing financial hardship.
Exactly.
And then there's another detail that I found quite interesting. It says you can't have applied for refugee status in Canada before.
That's right. This program is specifically for skilled workers who are coming to contribute to the economy, not to seek asylum. There are different immigration pathways for that.
Got it. So it's important to understand that this stream has a very specific purpose. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. You've received that exciting letter of interest from Nova Scotia. You've confirmed that you meet all the eligibility criteria. What's the next step?
Well, then the real work begins. You have 30 days to submit your full application package to Nova Scotia. This is where you really need to showcase why you're a perfect fit for their province.
30 days.
Oh, wow.
That's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you need to include in this application package?
Think of it as building a comprehensive story about yourself. They'll want to see detailed letters of reference from past employers, proof of your work experience, financial statements to prove you can support yourself. Passport details, of course, any relevant travel history.
Wow, it sounds like gathering all of that could be a bit of a treasure hunt.
It can be a bit of a process, but trust me, it's worth it. Each document is like a piece of the puzzle that builds a picture of your qualifications and your potential to contribute to Nova Scotia. It's your chance to shine.
So you've submitted your application, you've held your breath, you're eagerly waiting for that decision. What are the possible outcomes at this stage?
Well, the best case scenario, you get nominated. This means Nova Scotia has reviewed your application and they believe you'd be a great addition to their province.
That's great news. But what if things don't go as planned?
Well, if your application is refused, you have 10 business days to provide any additional information that they might need.
Oh, okay, so there's a little bit of a window to maybe clarify some things or add missing documents?
Exactly, but after that, the decision is final. There's no appeals process.
So it's crucial to be thorough and accurate from the get-go. Now I think it's time to talk about the fun part. Why would someone choose Nova Scotia in the first place? What's so special about this province?
Nova Scotia offers a really unique blend of opportunity and quality of life that you don't find everywhere. It's known for its natural beauty, its friendly people, and its affordable cost of living.
I've heard great things about the people there. Everyone says they're so welcoming.
It's true. Nova Scotians are known for their warm hospitality. You'll find diverse communities where people from all walks of life really come together. It's a great place to feel like you belong.
And let's not forget the practical side of things. How does Nova Scotia compare to other Canadian provinces when it comes to cost of living? Because I know that can be a big concern for people who are moving to a new country.
That's one of the biggest advantages of choosing Nova Scotia. The cost of living is generally more affordable compared to like the larger Canadian cities. Housing in particular is way more reasonable.
That's a huge relief for people starting their new lives.
Absolutely. And it's not just about finances. Nova Scotia also has a really strong healthcare system and a great education system for families with children.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty rosy picture so far. But we also need to be realistic. Every place has its challenges. What are some things that our listeners should be aware of if they're considering Nova Scotia?
It's true, every place has its challenges. I think it's important to remember that even though Nova Scotia is a very welcoming place, it's still a big move. There will be an adjustment period, as you adapt to a new culture and way of life. It's important to have realistic expectations and be patient with yourself.
Yeah, you can't expect everything to be perfect overnight. It takes time to settle in and build a new life.
Exactly. And while the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream is a great opportunity, it's important to remember that simply meeting the eligibility criteria doesn't guarantee that your application will be approved. And also, the program's requirements can change, so it's crucial to stay updated and make sure you have the latest information.
Speaking of staying updated, we should also emphasize how important honesty is throughout this entire process.
Oh, absolutely. Any kind of misrepresentation on your application, even a small one, can have serious consequences.
Like, what kind of consequences are we talking about?
You could face a 5-year ban from all Canadian immigration programs, so it's really important to be transparent and honest from the very beginning.
So listeners, take note. It's always better to err on the side of caution and disclose all the relevant information up front.
Definitely.
Now, let's say someone's listening to this thinking, Nova Scotia sounds incredible. I'm really interested, but I still have a ton of questions. What would you recommend as a next step?
Well, that's where Immigration Bridging Academy comes in. They offer free consultations to help you figure out if the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream is the right fit for your situation. They can assess your qualifications, guide you through the process, and answer any questions you might have.
Perfect. They're like your personalized GPS for navigating this whole journey. You can find the link to book your free consultation in the description below.
Don't miss out on that.
Now, before we move on to the nitty-gritty details of the application process in part 2, I'm curious about something. What advice would you give specifically to our young African listeners who are considering this path?
That's a great question. I think it's important to acknowledge that for young Africans, the decision to move to another country can be particularly significant. It's not just about a change in location. It's often about seeking a better future for yourself and your family.
It's a huge decision.
It is. And while this program offers amazing opportunities, it's also important to be realistic about the challenges that you might face. Things like cultural differences, adapting to a new environment, recognizing foreign qualifications, all of that takes time and effort.
Yeah, and building a support network in a new country can be really challenging as well.
It's essential. But luckily, Nova Scotia has a lot of resources and support organizations specifically for newcomers. And connecting with other immigrants, particularly those from your own region or cultural background, can be incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. It's all about finding your community and knowing that you don't have to go through this alone. There are people who understand what you're going through and who are ready to support you.
Exactly. And while there will be challenges, I also want to emphasize the incredible resilience and adaptability that young Africans bring to the table. You have a unique set of skills and experiences and perspectives that can enrich not only your own lives, but also the communities you join in Nova Scotia.
I love that it's like a two-way street. Both the individuals and the province benefit from this exchange of talent and culture.
Absolutely. It's about creating a more vibrant and diverse future for everyone.
I love that. Well, this has been such an insightful conversation already. We've covered so much ground, from understanding the basics of this program to exploring the potential benefits and challenges of actually settling in Nova Scotia. And in part 2, we'll delve even deeper into the specific documents you'll need to gather for your application and some tips for navigating that process successfully. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive on the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream. In part 1, we talked about the overall program, the benefits and challenges, and now we're going to roll up our sleeves and get into the actual application process.
All right, so let's say you've received that letter of interest. You've confirmed you meet all the eligibility criteria. What happens next?
You've got 30 days to submit your application package to Nova Scotia.
30 days.
Yeah, you got to move quickly on this one.
So what kind of documents are we talking about here? What people need to be prepared for?
It's all about telling your story and backing it up with evidence. They're looking at your work experience first and foremost.
Because this program is all about attracting skilled workers who can contribute to Nova Scotia's economy, right? So it's not enough to just say, hey, I worked here and there. You actually have to prove it and show how your skills align with what they need.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's where those letters of reference become super important. They want to see details about your responsibilities, your achievements, any projects you led, anything that shows you have the skills they're looking for.
So it's almost like each letter of reference needs to be a mini marketing campaign for yourself.
That's a great way to put it. And make sure those letters are legit, on company letterhead, signed by someone with authority like your manager or an HR rep.
Right, because they need to know it's a credible force.
Yeah.
And speaking of proving things, our sources also mention that you need documentation that proves you meet the minimum work experience requirements for one of the express entry programs. What kind of documents would that be?
Think pay stubs, employment contracts, tax records, anything that officially verifies your work history, the type of work you did. The more details you can provide, the better.
Got it. So it's not enough to just have the experience. You need a paper trail to back it up. Okay. So work experience is covered. What about the financial side of things? I know we touched on this earlier, but I'm sure our listeners want more details about how to prove they can support themselves financially.
Yeah, financial stability is a big deal for immigration. They want to make sure you can support yourself and your family when you first arrive. Typically, they ask for bank statements from the past 3 months showing all your account balances and transactions. They're basically looking at your financial habits to see if you're responsible with money.
So it's not just about having a certain amount saved up. It's about showing a consistent pattern of managing your money well.
Right. And if you have investments, be ready to show statements that outline those holdings as well.
What about assets like real estate or personal property? Do those count?
Not really. They're mainly interested in seeing funds that you can easily access to cover living expenses.
So how much money do you actually need to show? I'm sure that's the million-dollar question.
I wish there was a simple answer to that, but it really depends on your family size and whether you have a job offer in Nova Scotia already. You can find the specific amounts on the government website, but it's always a good idea to aim a little higher than the minimum just to be safe.
That's a smart move.
Yeah.
And are there any ways to potentially reduce that financial requirement?
Actually, yes. If you're already living and working in Nova Scotia, or if you have a job offer from a Nova Scotian employer, the financial requirement might be lower because you've already proven some level of financial stability.
So having a job offer lined up can make a big difference.
It definitely can. All right, so we've talked about work experience and finances. What else do you need? Well, your passport, of course, that's like your golden ticket.
I bet it's going to be a valid passport too, right?
Absolutely. Make sure your passport and the passports of any family members coming with you have at least 2 years left before they expire. And be ready to provide copies of all the important pages, your photo page, your personal info visa, stamps, the whole shebang. They want to see your travel history.
It's like they want to see where you've been and what you've been up to. Okay, so passport is covered. Anything else?
If you've ever applied to immigrate to Canada before, you need to include copies of any correspondence related to those applications. Whether it's federal or provincial, they want full transparency.
Makes sense. They want to see the whole picture. Now, there's one document that I'm a little curious about. It's that statement explaining why you want to leave your current province if you're already living in Canada.
Yeah, that one throws people off sometimes. But it's your chance to really sell yourself to Nova Scotia. Tell them why you're so interested in their province and why you think it's a better fit for you than where you are now.
So it's not just about listing the reasons why Nova Scotia is great. It's about connecting those reasons to your own personal goals and aspirations.
You got it. Show them you put some thought into this and that you're not just looking for any province, you're specifically drawn to Nova Scotia.
It's like writing a love letter to Nova Scotia. Okay, what about people who aren't Canadian citizens but are currently living in another country?
If you're living somewhere where you're not a citizen, you need to prove that you're legally allowed to be there. So things like a work permit or a residency visa are crucial.
They just want to make sure everything's above board. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of documents here: work experience, finances, passport travel history, even that unique statement about why you're choosing Nova Scotia. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is. But luckily, the actual submission process is pretty straightforward these days. Nova Scotia uses an online portal so you can upload everything electronically. No more dealing with mountains of paperwork.
That's a relief.
Just remember, you only have 30 days from the time you get your letter of interest to get everything submitted. So don't wait till the last minute. Start gathering those documents early.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And I think if there's one key takeaway from all of this, it's that thoroughness and honesty are absolutely essential.
100%. Take your time, gather all the necessary documents, make sure they're accurate and complete. It'll save you a lot of headaches down the road.
And if anyone's feeling lost or unsure, remember, Immigration Bridging Academy is there to help. They can answer your questions and walk you through every step of the process.
Exactly. They're a great resource, so don't hesitate to reach out.
Now, as we wrap up this part, I want to shift gears a bit. We've talked about the technicalities, but what about the human side of all of this? What's it actually like to settle in Nova Scotia? What challenges and rewards await? That's what we'll explore in part 3, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've explored the ins and outs of the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream in the previous parts, from eligibility to gathering documents. But now let's talk about the exciting part, what awaits you in Nova Scotia itself.
It's one thing to dream about a new life and another to actually live it right. So let's paint a picture of what settling in Nova Scotia might feel like.
Yeah, because arriving in a new country can be both exciting and overwhelming. What can newcomers expect in those first few weeks and months?
One of the things that stands out about Nova Scotia is its welcoming atmosphere, like genuinely welcoming. And it's not just a policy, it's really part of the culture.
I've heard so many people say that Nova Scotians are just incredibly friendly and helpful. Is that something you've observed?
Oh, absolutely. People are generally open and willing to connect, to share their culture, to help newcomers feel at home. And this isn't just in the big cities, it's throughout the province, even in smaller towns. You really feel that sense of community.
That's so important, especially when you're starting over in a new place. It's nice to know that people are there to support you. Now, let's talk about the environment itself. We've mentioned Nova Scotia's natural beauty, but what's it like to actually live surrounded by that kind of scenery?
Imagine waking up to that fresh Atlantic air, taking a walk along the coast, maybe exploring some of those charming fishing villages, or spending a weekend hiking through forests that turn all those vibrant colors in the fall. It's truly a nature lover's paradise.
Sounds idyllic. But what about people who are more drawn to city life? Does Nova Scotia have anything to offer them?
Oh, definitely. Halifax, the capital, is a really vibrant hub that has a mix of history, culture, and modern amenities. World-class restaurants, museums, theaters, a bustling waterfront, all within a surprisingly walkable city center. It's a really cool place to be.
So it sounds like there's a little something for everyone in Nova Scotia.
Uh-huh.
But let's be realistic. Moving to a new country, even one as welcoming as Nova Scotia, still comes with adjustments. What are some of the challenges that people might face?
Well, a cultural adaptation is often a big one. Even though Canada and many African countries share English as a common language, there can be subtle differences in communication styles, social norms, even humor. It takes time to adjust to those things.
It's those little things that can sometimes trip you up, right?
Exactly. And then there are the more practical things, like finding housing, navigating the healthcare system, getting your kids settled into new schools. It can all feel a bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah, those are all big steps in the settling in process.
Oh.
What advice would you give to someone who's feeling a bit overwhelmed by those challenges?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Nova Scotia has so many organizations that are dedicated to helping newcomers. They can help you find housing, understand your healthcare options, connect with community groups. You don't have to figure everything out on your own.
It takes a village, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, for our listeners who are specifically concerned about finding work in their field, what's the job market like in Nova Scotia? I know we talked about in-demand occupations, but are there actually jobs available?
Well, that's the beauty of the Labor Market Priorities Streamrite. It's designed to connect skilled workers with jobs that are actually needed in the province. But that being said, it's still important to do your research. Network. Polish your resume. Make sure you can really present your skills in a way that appeals to Canadian employers.
So even with a program like this, you still have to put in the effort to land that dream job.
You do. And if your qualifications aren't recognized in Canada, there are often ways to bridge that gap, like taking some extra courses or getting certified. It's all about being proactive.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you a big picture question. We've talked about the practical aspects, the emotional aspects of settling in Nova Scotia, but what about the long term? What kind of future can someone build for themselves and their family in this province?
That's when things get really exciting. Nova Scotia offers a chance to not just find a job, but to really build a life. You can achieve financial stability, raise your kids in a safe and welcoming environment, become part of a community. It's a chance to create a legacy, not just for yourself, but for future generations.
I love that idea of creating a legacy.
Yeah.
And while there will always be challenges along the way, it sounds like the rewards of building a life in Nova Scotia are pretty incredible.
They really are. It's a special place.
Well, this deep dive has been a real journey. from understanding the program itself to imagining what it might be like to live in Nova Scotia. And for those of you listening who are feeling inspired and ready to take the next step, remember, Immigration Bridging Academy is here to guide you every step of the way. You can book a free consultation with them, link in the description below, to see if the Nova Scotia Labour Market Priorities stream is the right path for you. And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.